8:30 on a July night, 1986. The sun is almost gone, the streetlights are buzzing on one by one, and somewhere, 3 blocks from home, an 11-year-old kid on a Schwinn Predator BMX bike suddenly realizes the law has changed. Not city law, not state law, mom law. The second that orange streetlight comes on, childhood freedom becomes a countdown. No phone, no tracker, no helmet, no bottled water. No adult knows exactly where he is. His knees are scraped, his t-shirt smells like hose water, and if he walks through the front door crying, the first thing he hears won't be, "Are you okay?" It will be, "What did you do now?" And if he says the wrong thing, the sentence gets handed down. "I'll give you something to cry about." Today, half of this sounds like neglect. Back then, it was just Tuesday. The childhood rules of the 1980s were a coherent system, trading indoor strictness for outdoor freedom, neighborhood authority for genuine independence. The reason modern parents hear them and flinch is worth understanding, because it's the same reason the people who grew up under those rules often describe them as the best years of their lives. Bill Owens documented the streetlight rule in real time in his 1973 photographic book, Suburbia, a suburban resident describing the daily rhythm plainly. The only real cue for us to come home was basically when the streetlights came on, and I'd come in, sweaty, dirty, and sunburnt from the day's activities. That wasn't one family's quirk. Decades of cross-demographic memory confirm the same rule from southern towns, Midwestern suburbs, New England neighborhoods, black communities, and white ones alike. Though in black households the rule carried additional weight. A child navigating American streets after dark faced different stakes entirely. The details vary, the rule doesn't. Households across America set the same alarm clock, and it ran on voltage. That bike ride covered serious territory. In the early 1980s, a kid on a mongoose could log 5 or 6 miles on a Saturday without a single adult knowing the route. No helmet was required anywhere in America for child cyclists until Howard County, Maryland passed the first local ordinance in 1990, motivated directly by the death of 13-year-old Christopher Kelly the previous fall. New Jersey became the first state to require helmets for child cyclists in 1992. Before either of those dates, a spill on asphalt was the price of admission, and everyone paid eventually. The car was no safer. By 1985, every state in America required car seats for young children, but those laws largely covered toddlers and infants. A 6-year-old in the front seat of a Ford Country Squire station wagon, no seatbelt, or 3 kids tumbling around the wood-paneled rear-facing Wayback with a bag of groceries? Legal in many states through much of the decade, and unremarkable in all of them. Even by 1987, only 80% of children were actually using car seats despite the mandates, because enforcement was minimal and the cultural habit was to survive the ride. The playground at the end of the block came with genuine hazards. Metal merry-go-rounds, metal slides, which researchers documented could cause serious burns in July heat, and climbing structures with concrete or asphalt beneath them. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission published its first Handbook for Public Playground Safety in 1981, beginning the long, slow process of phasing out the old equipment through insurance liability pressure and voluntary compliance. That process ran through the entire 1980s. The merry-go-round in your memory was probably still spinning into the following decade. Then there was the hose. Whoever's yard you were nearest when thirst hit, you drank from it. The water ran warm for the first few seconds and tasted faintly of rubber.
The concern is real. PVC hoses and older brass fittings can leach lead and other compounds, and the Safe Drinking Water Act amendments of 1986 banned lead-containing solder from new plumbing installations precisely because pre-1986 infrastructure commonly contained it. Drinking from the garden hose isn't illegal, but nobody's pediatrician today would recommend it. All of this operated under a governance system enforced by specific language. The 1980s household ran on verbal commands that functioned less like rules and more like passwords. Say them, and everyone in the room knew exactly where they stood. "Because I said so" was a complete argument requiring no footnotes. "Don't sit too close to the TV" had an actual origin. GE color televisions manufactured in 1967 were found to be emitting elevated levels of radiation, which first triggered the warning. The danger was corrected long before the 1980s, but the phrase survived as inherited household policy. "Wait till your father gets home" was prominent enough that Hanna-Barbera named a nationally syndicated animated series after it in 1972, running 3 seasons through 1974. And "I'll give you something to cry about" has become, in recent years, a viral reference point in discussions of what a new generation calls toxic parenting. Whether that framing is fair, it communicated one message precisely: stop performing, start coping. Beneath the authority language ran an older economic logic. The grandparents of 1980s children were Depression-era survivors. They grew up in households where food waste was a genuine moral failing, where electricity cost money the family didn't have, where clothing was passed down until it physically couldn't be worn anymore. That inheritance didn't disappear when prosperity arrived. It got transmitted as household rules. Clean your plate. Lights off when leaving a room. Shoes don't get replaced until the soles are gone. The American Academy of Pediatrics now explicitly advises against forcing children to finish meals, and its current obesity guidelines actively reverse the clean plate instruction. But the original rule wasn't arbitrary. It was encoded survival knowledge from adults who had genuinely gone without. The neighborhood operated as an extension of the household. Sociologists studying American suburbs documented the system. Any adult on the block could correct a child who was out of line. Getting caught doing something wrong at someone else's house meant 2 punishments: whatever the neighbor delivered on the spot, and whatever waited at home when the story arrived before you did. Teachers' complaints followed children home the same day. The child didn't belong only to the parents, it belonged to a loose surveillance network, and the network enforced shared standards without a single formal agreement between anyone. Then July 27, 1981 interrupted everything. Adam Walsh, age 6, was abducted from a Sears in the Hollywood Mall in Hollywood, Florida, while his mother shopped nearby. 16 days later, 2 fishermen found his severed head in a canal approximately 50 miles south of Vero Beach. Serial killer Otis Toole was eventually identified as the killer, but the case took 27 years to formally close. The made-for-television movie Adam drew approximately 38 million viewers. Milk cartons across America began featuring the faces of missing children shortly after. Congress passed the Missing Children's Act in 1982. In 1984, President Reagan opened the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, co-founded by Adam's father, John Walsh. In 1988, Walsh launched America's Most Wanted on Fox. In 1994, Walmart implemented Code Adam, the store-wide alert protocol named for the boy, at retail locations nationwide. One case ran a direct causal line from a Sears in Hollywood, Florida, to a complete transformation of how America thought about children in public space. The fear wasn't invented. A child was really murdered.
But the statistical picture that followed was seriously distorted. Peter Gray, a research professor of psychology at Boston College, who has studied the decline of children's free play for decades, traced the cultural inflection point to the 1980s. The fear of allowing children outdoors without adult supervision took hold, and what had been normal parenting, sending your kids outside to play, began to be regarded as negligent. His peer-reviewed work, published in 2023, connected the long decline in children's independent activity to rising rates of anxiety and depression in young people, a trend he traced back 50 years, well before the internet and well before COVID. The term helicopter parenting was formally coined in 1990 by child development researchers Foster Klein and Jim Fay in their book Parenting with Love and Logic. The behavior started roughly 9 years earlier, in the months after Adam Walsh disappeared from a Sears. What replaced the old system wasn't a straightforward improvement. The bargain of 1980s childhood ran like this: strict inside the house, free outside it. Over 90% of American parents spanked toddlers in the 1980s. School paddling was legal in most states, and at peak in 1978, 4% of all American school children were paddled at least once during the year.
The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that paddling was constitutional in a case involving James Ingram, an 8th grader from Florida, struck more than 20 times, hard enough to require medical attention. The indoor side of the bargain wasn't gentle, but the outdoor side was enormous. Kids who came home after dark smelling like hose water and cut grass had spent hours in genuinely unsupervised territory. Arcades at the mall where parents could drop you off for the afternoon. Empty lots, woods, bike routes that covered miles. The latchkey kid phenomenon, children coming home to empty houses after school and staying alone until dinner, became so widespread that the term entered common usage in the 1980s precisely to describe it. Modern parenting largely inverted the deal. Physical discipline declined. Endorsement of spanking fell from 46% to 21% at median income levels between 1988 and 2011. Discipline in general softened, but outdoor freedom contracted simultaneously. Children gained gentler interiors and smaller exteriors. Paula Fass, in The End of American Childhood, published by Princeton University Press in 2016, argued that current parental oversight actively threatens children's competence and initiative, the very qualities that American childhood had historically been organized to build. In January 2015, Danielle and Alexander Madiv of Silver Spring, Maryland, allowed their children, ages 10 and 6, to walk home from a park roughly 1 mile from their house. Maryland Child Protective Services investigated and found the parents guilty of what the agency called unsubstantiated neglect, a CPS finding, not a criminal conviction. National Review described the term as Orwellian. Utah passed the first state statute explicitly protecting free-range parenting in 2018. That a law was necessary at all measures how far the culture had traveled from the 1980s baseline. Nobody got arrested for the streetlight curfew. Nobody got charged for the hose water, the metal slide, or the 3-block bike ride with no helmet. Some of it's genuinely regulated now. Car seat coverage expanded, local helmet ordinances arrived in the 1990s, and some of it's simply judged differently, in a cultural climate shaped by one murder in a Florida shopping mall and the media machinery that followed. Both things are true. The danger was real, and the response exceeded the data by a considerable distance. The streetlight didn't ask where you had been. It didn't care whether your knee was bleeding, whether your bike chain had slipped, or whether you had spent the last hour drinking warm water from somebody's hose. It only said one thing: go home. And every kid on the block understood. The rule was strict. The freedom before it was enormous. That was the bargain. Subscribe for more stories like this.